Ray suggested that I go out and buy this book. It's Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. And you know, he said there's a secret in this book. And he said if you can find the secret in the book, you can have anything you seriously want. Now, you take a person that's unhappy, not very healthy, is in debt, you'd have a difficult time accepting that. I was 26, and I just couldn't accept the idea. But as Ray said, your way's not working, why don't you try his? And that's what I'd like to suggest to you today. If you're not getting the results you want, your way obviously isn't working, why don't you try ours? Now, I often mention that John and I have got license to brag about every idea we use because none of them are ours. We don't claim that we've originated these ideas. In fact, we openly admit we haven't. We've just gathered them from books here and seminars there and great teachers all over the world. And what we've done is put them together in an organized, coherent manner. So if your way is not giving you the results you want, I would suggest that you take a real serious look at these ideas. Now, I looked for the secret and I couldn't find it, but I found in one place here, he said a peculiar thing about this secret is that those who once acquire it and use it find themselves literally swept on to success with but little effort, and they never again submit to failure. What a marvelous promise. He said, if you doubt this, study the names of those who have used it, wherever they've been mentioned. Check their records for yourself, and you'll be convinced. Now, he lists upwards of 100 names here. He's got Henry Ford, William Wrigley, James J. Hill, George Eastman, Theodore Roosevelt. He goes on here, John D. Rockefeller, Thomas Edison, Luther Burbank, Woodrow Wilson. How could I relate to any of those people? I couldn't relate to them. But you see, in that first part, he said, check their names or check their records wherever they've been mentioned. So I did that. And I got out books on Edison, and I got books on Rockefeller, and I got books on Woodrow Wilson, and all the great people that he had mentioned here. And you know what I found? I found they were no different than you. They were no different than me. Many of them had very little formal education, which made me feel fairly comfortable because I didn't either. Many of them had very, very rough roads to start on. But I found out we were essentially all the same. Do you know what was different? The results they were getting. And as I studied on here further, in his chapter on persistence, and he mentions that persistence to the quality or to the character of the human being is like what carbon is to steel, he said the only thing that he could find in Edison or Ford that he never found in everyone else was persistence. They'd get a hold of an idea and they'd stick with that idea. And I look back in my own life and I never did that. I'd try something a couple of times, and if it was rough, I quit. I'd have people saying, oh, Bob, why don't you just give it up? I'd say, yeah, you're right, and I would. Now, you see, the people I was mixing with, they were losing too. I never stuck at anything. So I made up my mind, if I ever found this secret, I'd work it right until I died. Now, I did find the secret. It was in 100 different places in the book, and it was simply sit down, decide what you want, write it on a card, carry the card in your pocket, and read it as often as possible every day. Now, keep in mind, I was earning $4,000, I owed $6,000. I was sitting in a fire hall at the time, and I wrote on the card that I was going to have in my possession by New Year's Day of 1970, $25,000. Now, I wrote that on the card in 1960. You know, the idea of having $25,000, it was sort of a fantasy. I don't think there was $25,000 in the whole fire hall at the time. Now, I wrote that in the card in 1960. Keep in mind, I gave myself a decade to pull this deal off. I really didn't believe it was going to happen. But I found out a couple of things. I found if you write a lie on a card and you read it often enough, you're going to start to believe it. And you know, William James, back around the turn of the century, he said, believe, and your belief will actually create the fact. Well, I did what he suggested. I read this card every day. I'd carry it around and I'd just keep reading it. And one day one of the guys in the fire hall got a hold of it and they pulled the card away and they passed it all around. Everybody started to laugh. Proctor's going to get rich. I had a chap in a seminar the other day that he said the same thing had happened to him. He was in a seminar and he got one of these gold cards and they passed it around at work and he said, everybody laughed at me, but he said, I'm winning. Now, I didn't read the card in front of anyone any longer, but I kept reading it. I'd go to the bathroom, I'd sit in the toilet and lock the door, and I'd read the card. Or I'd be driving down the street, and I'd come to a traffic light, and I'd haul the card out and I'd read it. Now, something very funny happened to me. 1 year later, I was earning $175,000 a year. Now, that's an enormous change, and it went well beyond $1 million in a year. Now, that was not supposed to happen. See, everything I'd been taught since I was a little boy indicated that if you don't go to school, you can't win. If you don't have business experience, you can't win. I had not gone to school. My second month in high school, they asked me to leave. I'll never forget how happy I was when they made that decision. Yeah. As I look back, they were probably much happier than I was when they made that decision. But here I was, I was 16, I had very little knowledge, I had absolutely no skills, and at the very best, my attitude was poor. What chance did I have? I really didn't have any, but I didn't know that. And so I just bummed around from job to job, in and out of the Navy, in and out of factories, in and out of bars, mostly in and out of the bars, until I was 26. Here I was at 26 when Ray sat down with me. I had very little knowledge, absolutely no skills, and my attitude had not improved greatly. But he introduced me to this idea. And I found that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past. You may not have a colorful background, and maybe you have. You may not have a lot of formal education, and maybe you have. But it really doesn't matter if you've got a goal and you're willing to stick to it and study the laws, you're going to find out that you can win. So what I would suggest you do, as John's coming up here, just jot down in shorthand, in your book, anywhere on a blank space, that's something that you want. And look at the quote on the bottom of page 2. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Do the thing and you'll get the energy to do the thing." Do the thing and you'll get the energy to do the thing. Don't wait. Start right now whether you're ready or not. Just say, I'm going after it, I'm going to get it, and your present circumstance has got nothing to do with where you're going. Later on in the book here, you're going to find that there's a quote by a magnificent author. He said, your circumstances may be uncongenial right now, but they will not long remain so if you perceive an ideal and strive to reach it. Now think of that. You may not have much money. Your social life may be in a bit of a chaotic state. Maybe your business isn't going the way you'd really want it to go. He said, your circumstances may be uncongenial, but they will not long remain so if you perceive an ideal and strive to reach it. Now, flip over to the next page, and I'm going to invite John back on to lead you through how to get the proper use out of this program. And I don't suppose there's a better guy that I know to be able to do that, because I watched John start, and there's a story of him in Born Rich. I watched John start from ground zero and just keep making headway. John Canary learned how to use the ideas in this program so well that he's a very competent teacher of the ideas today.
What I left the seminar with was a desire to want to know more. There was something about it that stimulated a desire within me of all the things I ever wanted to do, but no one ever told me that I could do it. And I believe when I walked away from there, I felt very comfortable, at least with the idea that, hey, there is something about me that if I learned to use it properly, that I could actually go out and achieve it. Even though I didn't know how, I believed that that was a starting point. So that was the beginning for me, and what I got most out of that particular seminar. I believe where we went from there is, at that time, there was only perhaps a half day to a one-day seminar. And it was structured around the Earl Nightingale material, of course. And it wasn't as, I guess you could say, as prolific as it is today, although it was as energetic as it was today, you know, probably even more so. But today there seems to be a smoother flow, a more structured presentation, a more organized presentation in a way that an individual can actually take it and use a step-by-step methodical approach to actually working with their creative process. At that time, it was more of, you know, why not take a look at yourself and try to recognize that there's potential within you, and that if you set a goal, which I did at that time, and sitting in the front row of the seminar, just about that time, I took something called a goal card, which it wasn't as beautiful as it is today. It wasn't as organized or arranged as it is today. But that was back in around 1970, 71, in that period of time. And I remember Bob mentioning, if you take a card, write something on it that you want to do. And if you read it every day and do the best you can every day, you're going to achieve it. Now, I don't know how many people that day, wrote something on a card, but I would say most of them were actually writing something out. But I think it had a profound impact on me to the point that I wrote down that I was going to be doing what Proctor was doing. And even more importantly, that I was going to be doing it with him. Now, I'm sure that I talked to him on a number of occasions that particular day, but I was just like anyone else sitting in the audience. He probably heard that story from a number of people or related goals, something of that nature. But I knew that I was going to, I didn't know how. So wherever he was running a program, because I identified so much with the way that he explained it, there were so many people talking about how to in their seminars, and I was exposed to that. I was in training courses with respect to the product that I was selling at that time.